Welcome to the channel. Share where you're watching from. We'd love to find out, so drop a comment below, and let's jump into the story. Imagine discovering the person you've trusted for over a decade has been living a double life. Ethan Carter thought he had it all, until one confession unraveled everything. What he uncovered will shock you to the core. The golden light of the setting sun spilled through the windows of Ethan Carter's office, casting long shadows across his polished walnut desk. Papers and reports, ignored for hours, were strewn about like remnants of a chaotic week. His leather office chair creaked as he leaned back, rubbing his temples. It was already 8:45 p.m., and yet another dinner at home had passed without him. Downstairs, their spacious suburban home in Seattle, Washington, was eerily silent. There were no faint echoes of a true crime podcast playing on the speakers, no rhythmic tapping of keys from Olivia's laptop, and no gentle hum of the record player she cherished. Tonight's quietness felt heavy, almost accusatory. Ethan's fingers brushed over the gold wedding band on his left hand, a habit he had unconsciously developed over the past 12 years of marriage. Each touch summoned memories: Olivia's infectious laughter as they danced under string lights at their wedding, the joy of decorating their first home, and their easy, heartfelt conversations over late-night coffee and cookies. But those moments seemed like a distant dream. The bond they once had felt frayed, unraveling into awkward silences and unspoken frustrations. Olivia's once radiant smiles had become polite and distant, her laughter reserved for others, her absences more frequent than ever. His phone vibrated on the desk, jolting him out of his thoughts. It was a text from Megan, one of their mutual friends. Still buried in spreadsheets? Olivia mentioned you've been locked in your office all week. Ethan frowned. He hadn't confided in Olivia about his workload recently, or much of anything, really. Their conversations had dwindled into polite exchanges, devoid of any depth. He typed a quick reply before pushing his chair back and heading downstairs. As he descended the staircase, the creak of the wooden steps echoed louder than usual in the oppressive stillness. Olivia's car had been parked in the driveway earlier, but something about the air in the house felt wrong. "Olivia?" Ethan called, his voice cutting through the silence. "Sorry about dinner. Work ran late." He found her in the kitchen, seated at the granite countertop. The dimmed pendant lights above cast a soft glow on her. Her dark chestnut hair, tied loosely at the nape of her neck, caught the golden light from outside. A glass of red wine sat untouched beside her. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, stepping cautiously closer. Her fingers traced slow, deliberate circles on the countertop, her expression unreadable. The sapphire engagement ring he had carefully chosen during a business trip to Savannah, Georgia, caught the light faintly. "We need to talk," Olivia said softly, her tone calm yet laced with an undercurrent of tension. Ethan pulled out the stool next to her, the metallic scrape breaking the heavy quiet of the room. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern flickering in his voice. Olivia finally turned her gaze to meet his. Her green eyes, usually warm and lively, were clouded with an emotion he couldn't quite place. She offered him a faint smile, but it felt hollow, as if she had carefully removed all its warmth. "Actually," she began, her fingers stilling on the counter. "I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. For a moment, Ethan stared at her, his mind scrambling to process the revelation. "Pregnant?" He echoed, the word feeling foreign in his mouth. Pregnant. A word so small, yet so heavy with implications. His thoughts raced back to the past few months, their increasingly rare moments of intimacy, the growing distance between them. Something didn't add up. "When did you find out?" he finally asked, his tone measured. "This morning," Olivia replied, her voice steady as she reached for his hand. "I couldn't wait to tell you." Her touch was cold, her words strangely rehearsed. Ethan's mind worked through the timelines like a puzzle. Their last intimate moment was weeks ago, 7, maybe 8. Between his late nights at the office and her growing list of book club outings, their paths rarely crossed. The realization hit like a tidal wave. 8 weeks. I know we weren't trying, Olivia continued, her voice carrying a note of forced cheer. But sometimes life surprises you, right? Ethan's brow furrowed as he studied her. His thoughts churned, the timeline refusing to align. When? He asked, his voice sharper than he intended. When do you think it happened? Olivia's faint smile faltered, but she recovered quickly, laughing softly. Probably after Amanda's housewarming party. You remember? We had that expensive champagne you like, and things got cozy. Ethan clenched his jaw. He remembered the evening vividly, not because of champagne, but because he had left early with a pounding headache. Olivia had insisted on staying, texting him later to say she was catching a ride with Megan. That memory, once benign, now felt ominous, laden with contradictions. Right, Ethan said, his voice carefully neutral. He watched her closely as she slid off the stool and began moving around the kitchen, opening cabinets and drawers with an energy that felt out of place. I thought we could celebrate, she said brightly, pulling out a menu from Luna's Italian Kitchen, their favorite restaurant. I can order something for us, or we can finally open that vintage bottle of wine we've been saving. Ethan didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on her animated movements. The cheer in her tone, the eagerness in her actions, it all felt performative, like she was selling a scene she didn't believe in herself. Actually, he said after a pause, forcing a faint smile, I think I'll head to bed early. I'm exhausted. Olivia froze for a moment, her back to him. He saw her shoulders tense briefly before she turned around with a bright, practiced smile. Of course, she said smoothly. You've been working so hard lately. You need the rest. She stepped closer and brushed a light kiss against his cheek. Her perfume, a new fragrance he didn't recognize, lingered in the air, sharp and cloying. I told Rachel I'd meet her for coffee, Olivia added casually, grabbing her purse from the counter. She's been having a tough time with her boyfriend lately. You know how she gets. At this hour? Ethan asked, glancing at the clock. It was nearly 9 p.m. Just a quick chat, Olivia replied breezily. I'll be back soon. Without waiting for a response, she grabbed her keys and phone, flashing him a quick smile before heading out the door. Ethan remained seated, listening to the sound of her car starting and pulling out of the driveway. Only when the house was enveloped in silence again did he let out a slow, controlled breath. Rising from his seat, he made his way back to his office upstairs. Ethan opened his laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating the darkened room. His fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before he typed into the search bar, early pregnancy timeline. The search results appeared instantly, and his eyes scanned the information with growing unease. The timeline didn't match. Not even close. Their last intimate moment was over 8 weeks ago, and the symptoms Olivia described wouldn't align with that. His chest tightened as pieces of a larger, darker picture began to form. He switched tabs and opened their shared calendar. His mind latched onto specific dates, moments that suddenly felt significant in hindsight. There was the housewarming party Olivia mentioned, but also her work retreat last month and an impromptu spa day she claimed was a gift from Rachel. Ethan's phone buzzed on the desk, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from Olivia. Don't forget to take something for that cold. Love you, Red Heart. He stared at the message, his jaw tightening. The words felt hollow, calculated. Swiping to their recent message history, he scrolled through weeks of casual, surface-level exchanges. There was no depth, no emotion, just a series of empty gestures to maintain appearances. Opening his photo album, he searched for pictures from the housewarming party Olivia mentioned. His fingers froze on a candid photo of her standing near the bar, laughing with Megan and Rachel. In the background, a man in a tailored suit stood angled toward her, his posture subtly attentive. Ethan zoomed in on the image, but the man's face blurred as he enlarged it. His heart raced as he swiped through more photos from recent months. Patterns began to emerge. Olivia, slightly apart from the group, her phone often in her hand. Her smiles, once natural, now looked staged. One photo caught his eye, Olivia at the opening of Harborview Lounge, a new upscale bar downtown. She was mid-laugh, her posture leaning toward a man whose hand rested lightly on the small of her back. A loud noise outside startled Ethan. Rising quickly, he moved to the window and saw Olivia's car pulling into the driveway. He closed the laptop, his thoughts swirling. Moments later, Olivia walked through the door, her cheeks slightly flushed and her hair slightly tousled. She paused upon seeing him in the living room. "I thought you were heading to bed," she said lightly, setting her purse on the counter. "Couldn't sleep," Ethan replied, his voice calm but measured. "How's Rachel?" "Oh, you know," Olivia said breezily, pouring herself a glass of water. "Same old drama. She's thinking about breaking up with her boyfriend again." Ethan studied her carefully as she turned toward the hallway. Her movements felt too smooth, too rehearsed. "I'm going to shower and crash," Olivia added, glancing over her shoulder. "You coming?" "In a bit," Ethan said, offering a faint smile. "I've got some emails to finish." Olivia hesitated briefly before disappearing upstairs. Moments later, the sound of running water filled the house. Ethan reopened his laptop, this time navigating to their joint bank account. Scrolling through the transactions, his pulse quickened as a pattern emerged: regular charges from Morningside Cafe, a boutique coffee shop on the other side of town. Every Wednesday afternoon for the past 3 months, there was a $17.75 charge, 2 drinks. There were also receipts from the Grand Oaks Hotel, valet services at the Ellington, and several cash withdrawals that didn't match Olivia's usual spending habits. The shower shut off upstairs, and Ethan quickly closed the laptop. Leaning back in his chair, he stared at the ceiling, the fragments of a larger, unsettling truth beginning to solidify in his mind. The following morning, Olivia moved through the kitchen with ease, pouring coffee and humming softly, as if the tension from the night before didn't exist. Ethan sat at the dining table, his tablet in hand, feigning interest in an article while his mind raced. "I might be late tonight," Olivia said casually, stirring cream into her coffee. "Connor scheduled last-minute project reviews, and you know how thorough he is." Ethan's eyes flicked up at her. "Connor Reeves? How's he been lately?" Olivia's hand stilled briefly before she resumed stirring. "Busy as always," she replied with a light laugh. "He's been practically living at the office. I'll probably grab dinner with the team afterward." "Which restaurant?" Ethan asked, his tone neutral. "Oh, probably Riverside Bistro," Olivia said, not meeting his gaze. "You know how much everyone loves their pasta." She kissed his cheek quickly, grabbing her bag and keys. "Don't wait up, okay?" Ethan nodded, watching her leave with a mixture of dread and resolve. The moment her car disappeared down the street, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Jake Hansen Investigations," a calm voice answered. "I'd like to hire you," Ethan said, his tone steady. Jake Hansen, a private investigator with a reputation for getting answers, agreed to meet Ethan later that afternoon. In Jake's modest office, Ethan laid everything out: the timeline discrepancies, the suspicious charges, and Olivia's increasing absences. "You're looking for confirmation," Jake said, leaning back in his chair. "And I'll get it for you. But you need to be ready for whatever I find." Ethan nodded grimly. "I need to know the truth." Jake slid a notepad across the desk. "Write down the names of her coworkers, friends, and any places she frequents. The more details, the better." Ethan spent the next hour meticulously recounting everything he could remember: Olivia's frequent mentions of Connor, her weekly visits to Morningside Cafe, and the spa day with Rachel that now felt suspect. Jake studied the notes and nodded. "This is a solid start. I'll be in touch. By the time Ethan returned home, the weight in his chest had grown heavier. He sat in his office, staring at his laptop screen, debating his next move. His phone buzzed, a message from Olivia. Hope your day's going well. Can't wait to catch up tonight, Redheart. The words felt like salt in an open wound. Ethan typed a brief response, then pulled up the photos he'd found the night before. His eyes lingered on the image from Harborview Lounge, Olivia's smile radiant as she leaned toward the man with his hand on her back. Later that evening, Jake sent Ethan an update. She's at the Belmont Hotel, room 417. With someone. The message hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He sat in his car outside the hotel, the engine idling as he debated what to do next. His grip tightened on the steering wheel as he replayed Jake's words in his mind. Finally, he stepped out, pulling his baseball cap low over his eyes. The Belmont was upscale but understated, its lobby quiet and elegant. Ethan blended into the flow of guests as he made his way to the elevator. On the 4th floor, he paused outside room 417. Faint laughter seeped through the door, Olivia's voice, unmistakable, mingling with a deeper male voice. Ethan's hand hovered over the door, his pulse pounding in his ears. He knocked firmly. The laughter stopped. After a few tense moments, the door opened a crack, revealing Connor Reeves. His expression shifted from surprise to unease in an instant. Ethan? Connor said, his voice tight. Ethan pushed the door open, stepping inside before Connor could react. Olivia was standing near the window, her face pale as she turned to see him. Ethan, she stammered, her voice trembling. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? Ethan repeated coldly, his gaze sweeping the room. His eyes landed on the wine glasses on the table, the rumpled bedspread, and Olivia's flushed face. Connor stepped forward, his hands raised. Look, this isn't what it looks like. Save it, Ethan snapped, his voice cutting through the room like ice. Olivia moved closer, her hands trembling as she reached for Ethan. Please, let me explain, she said, her voice breaking. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up, the recording app still running. Go ahead, he said icily. Explain. Olivia froze, her gaze darting between Ethan and Connor. The confident, composed demeanor she often wore was unraveling before his eyes. Ethan, it's not what you think, she began, her voice trembling. I know how this looks, but it's complicated. Complicated? Ethan echoed, his tone laced with quiet fury. You're in a hotel room with another man. Enlighten me on what's complicated about that. Connor stepped forward again, his hand still raised in a placating gesture. Look, I didn't know she was married, he said quickly. She told me you two were separated. Ethan's laugh was sharp and humorless. Separated? That's creative, Olivia. Is that the story you've been peddling to everyone? Olivia's face crumpled, tears welling up in her green eyes. I didn't know how to tell you, she whispered. We've been so distant. I didn't plan for this to happen. Ethan's jaw tightened as he gestured toward the disheveled bed. You didn't plan for this? How long has it been going on, Olivia? Weeks? Months? She hesitated, her silence answering for her. Connor looked between them, clearly uncomfortable. I'll go, he muttered, grabbing his jacket from the chair. No, Ethan said sharply, his gaze locking onto Connor. You're staying. I want to hear it from both of you. Olivia's sobs grew louder as she sank onto the edge of the bed. Ethan, please, I made a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I was lonely, and you were always working. Ethan's voice rose, cutting through her excuses. Lonely? So this is my fault now. You couldn't communicate like an adult, so you decided to sneak around behind my back. Connor cleared his throat awkwardly. Look, man, I really didn't know. If I had. You didn't know she was married, but you booked a hotel room with her. Ethan interrupted, his voice icy. You expect me to believe that? Connor opened his mouth to respond but quickly thought better of it. Olivia stood, her tears streaking her pale cheeks. Ethan, I'll end it. I'll cut all ties with him, with everything. Just please, don't throw away what we have. Ethan shook his head, his eyes blazing. You threw it away, Olivia. The lies, the deceit, you've destroyed everything. The tension in the room was suffocating. Ethan turned toward the door, his voice cold and final. I'm done. Don't come home tonight. Olivia's sobs followed him as he walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. Back in his car, Ethan sat gripping the steering wheel, his mind racing. Every memory of the past year felt tainted, reframed by the betrayal he had just witnessed. His phone buzzed on the passenger seat, it was a message from Jake Hansen. Ryan Cooper. Frequent companion. Likely more involved than Connor. Found receipts linking him to several of her outings. Ethan's stomach turned as he read the name. Another man. The betrayal ran deeper than he'd thought. The next day, Ethan met with Jake in his office, where the private investigator laid out a new set of findings. Photos, receipts, and timelines pointed to a second affair, this time with Ryan Cooper, a wealthy investor and, ironically, married. This guy is bold, Jake said, sliding a photo across the desk. It showed Olivia and Ryan at a private villa outside the city. Not just casual dinners. He's been funding her little escapades. Ethan's eyes narrowed as he flipped through the evidence. One image caught his attention, Ryan handing Olivia a small envelope. What's in there? Ethan asked, his voice cold. Hard to say, Jake replied. But I'm looking into it. It could be money, documents, or something personal. Ethan clenched his jaw, the betrayal cutting deeper with each new revelation. Keep digging, he said. I want to know everything. Jake nodded. I'll get it done. But I have to ask, how far are you willing to take this? Ethan's expression hardened. As far as it needs to go. That evening, Olivia returned to the house, her demeanor subdued. She approached Ethan in the living room, where he sat with a glass of bourbon in hand. Ethan, can we talk? She asked hesitantly. Ethan gestured for her to sit, his expression unreadable. She perched on the edge of the couch, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I know I've hurt you, she began. But I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. Ethan's gaze was cold as he spoke. It's too late, Olivia. You didn't just hurt me, you broke my trust. And that's something I can't forgive. Her tears began to fall again. But we've been together for so long. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Ethan shook his head. It meant everything to me. Until you threw it away. He stood, pulling a folder from the coffee table. These are divorce papers, he said, placing them in front of her. You'll find everything is already outlined. The house, the accounts, they're mine. You'll get nothing. Olivia's eyes widened as she flipped through the documents. You're serious, she whispered. Dead serious, Ethan replied. Sign them. Or we go to court, and trust me, you won't like what comes out there. Olivia's hands trembled as she held the divorce papers. The weight of Ethan's words hit her like a tidal wave, leaving her momentarily speechless. She looked up at him, her tear-streaked face a mixture of desperation and disbelief. You're really doing this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, Ethan said coldly, crossing his arms. And before you try to deny anything, know that I have proof. Of everything. Her fingers traced the edge of the folder, her lips parting as if to argue, but no words came. She looked down at the stack of documents, the reality of her situation sinking in. I didn't mean for this to happen, she said finally, her voice breaking. I was lonely. You were always working, and I felt invisible. Ethan's jaw tightened. And instead of talking to me, you decided to betray me. You didn't just destroy our marriage, you destroyed my trust. She shook her head, her tears falling freely. I never stopped loving you, Ethan. I know I made mistakes, but doesn't what we've built count for something? Ethan let out a bitter laugh, the sound hollow in the tense silence. What we built? Olivia, you've spent the last year tearing it apart. The tension was suffocating. Olivia buried her face in her hands, her sobs muffled. You have a week, Ethan said, his voice steady but devoid of emotion. Pack your things and leave. After that, I don't want to see you in this house again. She looked up, panic flickering in her tear-filled eyes. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, Ethan replied, his tone ice-cold. Maybe one of your friends can help you out. The next day, Ethan met with Evelyn Blake, a sharp and relentless divorce attorney. Her sleek office in the city exuded professionalism, and her reputation for leaving no stone unturned made her the perfect ally. Evelyn flipped through the folder Ethan handed her, her expression growing more serious with every page. This is a rock-solid case, she said, glancing up at him. You've got evidence of infidelity, financial fraud, and even misuse of joint assets. She doesn't stand a chance. I want everything, Ethan said firmly. The house, the accounts, everything. She deserves nothing. Evelyn nodded, a small smirk tugging at her lips. With this evidence, you'll get it. But be prepared, cases like this can get messy. Are you ready for a fight? Ethan's eyes hardened. I've been ready for months. That evening, Ethan received another update from Jake Hansen. The investigator had dug deeper into Olivia's connection with Ryan Cooper. She's been meeting him regularly, Jake said over the phone. But here's the kicker, he's pulling back. His wife caught wind of the affair, and he's panicking. It looks like Olivia is losing her safety net. Ethan's grip on the phone tightened. And Connor? His company's launching an internal investigation. He's about to lose his job, Jake replied. Looks like she backed the wrong horses. Ethan leaned back in his chair, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. Olivia had built her house of cards, and now it was collapsing around her. 2 days later, Olivia returned home to find Ethan waiting for her in the living room. His expression was calm but resolute, a stack of documents resting on the coffee table between them. Did you freeze the accounts? She demanded, her voice trembling. Yes, Ethan said simply. Her eyes widened in panic. You can't do that. I need money for rent, for. Not my problem, Ethan interrupted. You drained our joint account for your little escapades. You'll have to figure it out on your own. Olivia's panic shifted into anger. You can't just throw me away like this. We've been married for 12 years, Ethan. I deserve better than this. Ethan stood, his towering presence making her step back. You deserve exactly what you've earned, he said coldly. And that's nothing. Her shoulders sagged, the fight draining from her. Is there really no way to fix this? Ethan's gaze softened for a brief moment, but the weight of her betrayal quickly hardened his resolve. No, he said firmly. You made your choice. Now you'll live with the consequences. By the end of the week, Evelyn had finalized the divorce papers. The airtight case left Olivia with no leverage to negotiate. She signed them quietly, her hands shaking as she realized the life she once had was gone. As Olivia packed her belongings, Ethan stayed out of her way, retreating to his office. When the movers came to collect her boxes, she paused at the door and turned to face him one last time. Do you hate me? She asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan met her gaze, his expression unreadable. No, he said after a long pause. But I'll never forgive you. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Without another word, she walked out, leaving Ethan alone in the house that now felt eerily quiet. That evening, Ethan sat on the patio, a glass of bourbon in hand. The weight of the past few months slowly lifted, replaced by a strange sense of peace. His phone buzzed, a message from Megan. "Dinner tonight? My treat. You could use a friend." Ethan stared at the screen for a moment before typing a reply. "Sure. Let's celebrate." For the first time in months, he felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The lies, the betrayal, the heartbreak, they were all behind him now. What lay ahead was his to define. And this time, he would build it on his own terms.